Are people turning away from liberal democracy, and why? In the Western world, for the past century or so, there have been cycles of cultural rebellion from one generation to the next. Some of it artificial, some of it legitimate, most of it a reaction of one generation to the previous, political disagreements, social disagreements, so on, economic disagreements, so on and so forth. And we're seeing this cultural rebellion once again with the youngest generations. Generation Z is more conservative than any other generation in, well, nearly a century. Why is this? Why is it that so many young people are turning away from liberal democracy? Why is there such a sudden surge in the dissident right in comparison to other years? To understand this, I think we need to cover two things. One, the cultural rebellion that's been going on for a long time, and two, the spread of mass media. So as I said before, the past century we've seen a lot of cultural rebellions. One generation says, the old generation are tired and worn out, we're going to be different from them. We're going to be unique, we're going to have our own style. The hippie culture, for example, the counterculture as it's known, was in some part artificial, created by the Marxists. But on the other hand, this trend of not wanting to identify with your parents is something that's been going on for quite some time. It seems to happen in every human population. We go back to the fashion trends of 18th century England. Every new generation, there would be a different trend in fashion as to differentiate themselves from the previous ones and to make themselves unique in some way. So as soon as there is a spread of information, there is a counterculture movement. That leads me to the second point, which is the spread of mass media and the technological advances that we've seen alongside the rise of mass media. Because you have to understand that young people today are more connected to the outside world than ever before in history. Elementary school kids, middle school kids, young people, 9, 10, 14 years old, can now access the totality of human knowledge by simply typing in on the device in their pockets. But this also means that they have unlimited access, unless their parents are any decent, to the totality of human depravity and social decay. At any point during their day, they can pull out their phone and access the most horrific things that humanity is capable of producing. Pornography, news stories of mass murderers and killers and psychopaths, and documentaries of the very worst humans that have ever existed. Pedophilia, gruesome behavior. What used to be shielded from the child's mind has now become something that they can access in an instant if they so desire. And what effect does this have on children? It's not inherently a bad thing, and I'll tell you why. The more that people are exposed to this type of depravity, the more conservative they become. This is true almost anywhere you look. I had first-hand access to the depravity of the inner city, of the ghetto, some of the worst human beings that can exist, surrounded by them on a daily basis. And what does this do to your psyche? Well, it tears you down and builds you back up. As a traditionalist, if you have any sense in your mind, you will counter this behavior. You will be anti-this and anti-that. Of course, modern leftists will brand you a Nazi, call you a fascist, all of these things, for simply not wanting to engage in their degenerate behavior. If you're not pro-vagrant or pro-sexual liberation, you are the worst thing that exists. And now children have access to this type of information. They've seen exactly what happens when they don't toe the party line. They get called the most horrible person to have ever existed, even though their views are rather milquetoast. Although I see it as sort of a compliment to be called the next incarnation of Hitler, but that's just me. So this has a huge effect on how our children think. They're exposed to things, and they're still in this age range where their intuition is guiding their principles, quite heavily, in fact. And their intuition tells them to stay away from these things. They're naturally disgusted. It has not been brainwashed out of them quite yet. They haven't been exposed to higher education or lots of Marxism yet. Their minds are still fairly malleable, and exposure to this type of behavior makes them resent it or hate it. It breeds hatred, which is a good thing. But now you compound that. You take a child and you raise them in the city. You show them what urban sprawl does to the human soul, how it decays you, turns you into a monster. You expose a child to the soul-crushing reality of the inner city. Now you understand why I think the way that I do. Because I have a first-hand account, first-hand experience of how bad things can get. Not at their very worst, mind you, but when things get bad, they get bad. And I fear, yes, fear and emotion, that things will only get worse and that the rest of the country will have to experience this depravity. Which is why I feel as if I need to do something to stop the spread of this social ill, this political malevolence that seems to be spreading across the Western world. And you combine that with the fact that on my phone I can pull up a video of the most horrific things that human beings are capable of in a moment's notice, with no filters. You begin to understand the human condition. And this is why our young are seeking alternatives to liberal democracy. They are tired of what they're seeing. They want to make a change. It's not working. We've tried liberalism now, and look at what it's done. It's brought us to the brink of destruction, and it's only going to get worse until we change something. And this is the problem. These youth are getting riled up. They're looking for an alternative. Many of them will fall into the hands of the Marxist communists. They will make the situation worse, fall victim to their nonsense. These young people are looking for a leader, a movement to latch themselves onto, an identity. We must fill that void when the time comes, which is coming soon. Otherwise, they will be snatched up by our political opponents. This is why I spend so much time talking to people, particularly young people. Well, I say young, I mean 16, 17, 18-year-olds. People in their early to mid-20s. It's important that this demographic gets it into their heads that a change is coming, but we want it to be a change that we can believe in. That's the future that's unfolding before us, and that's my message. Thanks for listening.